I made a table for my mirror saw, and this is my first step to a better organized workshop. Let me show you how I did it. Okay, a few months ago I got this mirror saw because I wanted to cut long logs of wood into little pieces of the same size, but also because a mirror saw is pretty great for almost all cuts. But I had a problem. I had no space on my workbench to put it on and use my lathe and vise conveniently. So I needed to make something where I could put the saw on and be able to use it at full capacity. First, I took measurements of my mirror saw, so that I could know how big and tall my table needed to be, so that I feel comfortable when using it. I didn't want the lever to be too tall nor too low. After having the measurements, I used SketchUp to make a 3D model of the table and work on its design. After being confident with the model I had, I just needed to select the type of wood I'll be using. Since this was going to be my first build and my first version, I didn't want to use expensive wood. So yes, you guessed it, I chose pine. Pine was the perfect option for me because it is light, not that expensive, and easy to work with.
Before we continue, I have to make a disclaimer. See, I'm from Colombia, and here we use the metric system, unlike the US where you use the imperial system. So I'll try to give you guys measurements in both systems, but bear with me, imperial fellows, if I give you some measurement without 100% accuracy.
For the top, I had two options, MDF or plywood. Both options were pretty similar in price, but I ended up going with plywood because I like its texture better than MDF. Plus, I feel it's harder and more durable and less likely to create cracks when using screws. So after a quick trip to my hardware store, I got a pack of 6 2x4 logs of pine of 10.5 feet each. I also got a sheet of plywood of 15mm thickness and 8x4 feet. I also got some screws, wood glue, plus other stuff I needed for the project. Okay, back in the bat cave, I just needed to figure out how in hell I was going to cut everything with that reduced space. I started to mark each log into the size I wanted to make the cut, and also adjust the circular saw into the depth of the strip to maximize the blade performance. Right in the middle of cutting these logs, I realized I had bought more logs than I needed. But you know the saying, better to have too many than too few. Here I'm just preparing to cut the borders of each log. I marked the logs so I knew easily which one were going to be part of the bottom and top frame. I gotta tell you, this was my first time using this mirror saw and I felt pretty good about its performance. One thing I quickly realized is the huge amount of dust this saw produces. The dust covered up all my workbench bag and tools, so I had to use my air gun to get rid of it. But I'm already working out something to deal with this. After putting the whole sheet of plywood in place to cut, I added some strips of logs at one of the ends for support. I'm sure that was safe. The board covered up almost all my working space around the garage, so I had to crawl underneath it to get into cut position. You can see how close to the edge of the space I was here. Then I just had to measure the distance I needed for the first plank of wood of the top. I grabbed an old pallet strip I had in the garage to work as a guide for the circle of saw. I couldn't make the entire cut in one pass since the board was too long, so I ended up using my Japanese saw. I cut the board a few inches wider than I needed it to be because I wanted to cut the original lateral edges of the board and make them as straight as possible. The second cut was no easier than the first one. The space kept being too narrow, and just as the first one, I had to use my Japanese saw to complete it. After having all pieces cut, I wanted to cut them in groups to make sure they were all equal in length. Now it was time for the glue. Quick tip: if you are planning to use a brush to spread the glue over your project, be prepared to say goodbye to it after using it. I recommend using a plastic spatula to spread it. You need more technique, but it's easier to clean it after. Here I'm just putting the two frames together and pressing them to let them sit and bond.
"48 hours later."
After a few days of letting the glue bond with the wood, the frame felt firm and strong. I used these sawhorses I got from Amazon to support the frame while I put everything in place and glued it up. They are awesome, I really love them. Leave me a comment if you would like me to send you a link to get them. Now it was time to bind the frame with more logs to make the table's structure. Here you can see I learned my lesson about the brush and glue, and started to use a spatula. I was super obsessive compulsive into making the union as straight as possible since I didn't own any corner clamp. Make sure you put glue in all sides of the wood you want to buy. I use 4 long clamps to press the frame, plus some little clamps in other areas to secure the bonding even more.
Much later.
After a few days, the frame was all bond and strong. So it was time for drilling. I started to make small holes so the nail after it will penetrate easily. I really enjoyed this part because the frame felt pretty sturdy at the end. Here I'm just presenting the parts to see how much I wanted to cut from the top, and also cause I was done that day, lol. The next day, I cut the top into the length I actually needed it to be. As you can see, I used a straight saw guide to make the cut this time. I marked the second board and repeated the cut. When I presented the top on the table, I saw they were a bit wider. But I cut that as well. And there you have it, pieces of the same size. By the time I filmed this, I was 187 pounds, or 85 kilograms, and the table was just fine with that. I knew I was going to the right direction. Now, it was time to glue up the two parts of the top. I added a generous amount of glue all over both surfaces and placed them carefully. I added clamps to it to make sure the bond was strong. I also added the saw for weight on and the long clamps for more pressure. After a few days, it was time to check on it again. I removed the saw and the clamps, and the top was ready to go. Now it was finally time to glue the frame with the top. I added glue all over the top of the frame at the edges of the top, and then put more clamps on it along with the saw too. After a few days, the frame was all bound together, but I added some nails on it to secure it even further. Now it was time to add the tires. I got these on the internet as well, so leave me a comment if you want me to send you the link for them. I pre-drill and drill the hole for the tires and tie them. I also added some glue into the holes just for the sake of it. Wow, this is my first ever build guys, and I'm pretty happy by how it turned out. The frame and top feel super sturdy. I don't know exactly how much weight it can withstand, but it can take me and the saw without any problem, and also rotate in the process, and that's all that matters. Alright guys, that's it for now. In the next video, I'm going to add wings on both sides of the table, also a T-track onto those wings, so I can secure boards and logs and make cuts of the same size, plus maybe some other thing, just improve it. So thank you for watching, please subscribe, hit the like button, and stay tuned for the next part of this series. Bye bye.